Okay, so this is our guided notes for the classification of matter. This will be the first part where we're talking about what is matter and what are the two properties of matter, physical or chemical properties. So what is matter? Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. You might remember that from when we talked about the metric system. And we talked about mass and we talked about volume. And so matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. So some examples of matter include air, plastic, metal, wood, glass, even paper and cloth. And there's lots of things that you can use as examples of matter. Because again, it's anything that has mass and it takes up space. So those are lots of different examples you could use. So matter can have many different properties or characteristics. Chemistry is the study of the properties of matter and how matter changes. And that's exactly the type of science that we're studying right now. It's called chemistry. They even have classes in high school and college that are just called chemistry, and that's all you do is study the properties of matter and how matter changes. Now, this time we're just going to be talking just a little bit about matter. So not enough to have a complete entire year just studying the chemistry of matter. So we'll just get an introductory course this time. The properties and changes of any type of matter depends on its makeup. So the properties and changes of any type of matter depend on its makeup. Some types of matter are substances, and some are not. Now, what is a substance? Okay, a substance is a single kind of matter that is pure. This means that it has a specific makeup or composition. Okay, so it has a specific makeup or composition that gives it a specific set of properties. Okay, so a substance is a single kind of matter that is pure. This means that it has a specific makeup or composition that gives it a specific set of properties. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Talking about different properties of matter. Now there are two different types of properties. Let's first talk about the physical properties. Okay. So a physical property is a characteristic of a pure substance that can be observed without changing it into another substance. Okay. A physical property is a characteristic of a pure substance that can be observed without changing it into another substance. So an example of a physical property would include your melting point or boiling point, okay? This could also be like states of matter, because when you talk about the states of matter and if it's solid, liquid, or gas, well, that's going to be based on its melting or boiling point most of the time, okay? You could have the texture, the color of something be a physical property, flexibility, like a slinky, that's a physical property. And whether or not it dissolves, okay, so it's dissolution. Can it dissolve or not? This is dissolution. All of those are examples of physical properties. Okay, so you can take a look at figure 2 in your book. You might see like a hungry chameleon on that figure. It has a certain type of texture or a certain color depending on what it's on even. Okay, that's its physical property. Now, let's have a little flashback to 6th grade. Okay, so 6th grade flashback. So do you remember these states of matter? Do you remember what are the 3 states of matter that you studied last year? Yes, there are more states of matter, but the basic 3 that you must know at this age level would be solid, liquid, and gas. Okay. So what would those molecules or those atoms look like if it's a solid? Well, if it's a solid, they're all going to be very tightly packed together. Okay, so a solid would have particles that look like this, where they're very tight. Now a liquid, they're still going to be pretty close to each other, but it's going to be more fluid. Okay, so this one might look more like a liquid. Okay, and sometimes they still touch. Okay, but they're not as pushed together, as dense as a solid would be. And in your gas, it's less dense. We know that they're not together because you can walk through air and air is a gas. So that would be representative of the particles in a gaseous state. Okay, so moving on, after physical properties, now we need to talk about chemical properties. Okay, so chemical properties. Oops. We need to just scroll down. Okay, so the next part is talking about chemical properties. We just talked about physical, now let's talk about chemical properties. Okay, a chemical property is a characteristic of a pure substance. Okay, so this is a characteristic of a pure substance that describes its ability to change into different substances. Okay, so unlike a physical property, chemical properties can't be observed just by looking. So they can't be observed just by looking at or touching a substance. Okay, so examples of chemical properties would include flammability, okay, so that's like wood that catches fire, okay. The ability to react, so that might be iron reacting by turning into rust, okay, or new substances that then have new properties. Okay, so if you get a new substance that's created, it's going to have new properties. Okay, so for example, we might be talking about yeast that's going to rise. Okay, so if we talk about yeast, that produces carbon dioxide, that's a gas. Okay, and as that releases gas, that helps your bread to rise. Okay, so this is a chemical reaction to help bread rise. You can take a look at figure 3 in your book and you can see examples of all of those chemical properties. Okay, so we're going to stop here for our first section, and then we'll continue with our second part of this unit, which talks about elements, compounds, and mixtures. Thank you for listening.